Here we are at the Pasadena Book Fair. It's February 2016. The fair is sponsored by the Southern California chapter of ABAA. And our next interview is with Kurt Sanftleben of Read 'em Again Books, or something to that extent. We're going to ask him about that in a minute. But first, Kurt, what we do with everybody who comes in here, we want to know about your family background, what your parents did. Do you have siblings? Are you married? Do you have children? What's your educational background? So give us a little mini biography and take as long as you need.
Sure. Well, first, I am married, and my wife helps out with the book business. She takes care of the administrative, logistics, transportation stuff, and I worry about the books. She's here. She's watching the booth right now. And we do have 2 kids and grandkids. But I grew up in a small bedroom, middle-class suburb of St. Louis. And my father attended St. Louis University and General Motors Institute on the GI Bill. And after that, he went to work for the man who would be his father-in-law and managed a Buick dealership in St. Louis. And he did that until I was 1 or 2 years old. And then my grandfather retired, sold the dealership, and my dad went into business for himself, and he opened a Ben Franklin store, if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
The variety stores in North St. Louis. And then also a Hallmark card shop in West County. My mom also, went to college, and she majored in chemistry at Washington University in St. Louis. And after she graduated, she worked at the Washington University Medical School's Thoracic Research Laboratory, which was affiliated with the Cardiopulmonary Department at Orange Research Hospital in St. Louis. And she did that until I came along, at which time she became a stay-at-home mom. And she stayed a stay-at-home mom until my younger sister, Susan, went off to school. And then she went back to work, but not in the medical research field. She went back to work for the school district, our local school district, Webster Groves. And she worked in the business management side of the house, both at the high school and also for the superintendent at the district office. My sister went on to become a pharmacist, and she still lives in the St. Louis area with her family. And I went off to Michigan, and I went to Michigan State University.
A Spartan.
I'm a Spartan, yeah. And I graduated in 1974 with a degree in education and a teaching certificate that would let me teach kindergarten to 8th grade, any subject, and a number of academic subjects in high school, but I never used it. And that was because I went to Michigan State on a full ROTC scholarship. And the day after I graduated, I raised my hand and I became a second lieutenant in the United States Army. And I stayed in the Army for the next 21 years. And I retired in '94. And about halfway through my military career, it hit me that, I'm gonna need a job once I leave, whether I leave at 20 or whether I stick around to 30. And so I started thinking about that, and I decided it'd probably be a lot of fun after I retired from the Army to be a instructor, a teacher at junior college level. And so I started working towards that on my own time, through evening schools, weekends. And I worked on my graduate degrees, and I got a master's in humanities, interdisciplinary humanities, with concentration in history and literature from a school right here in town, Cal State at Dominguez Hills. And then I got my doctorate from the College of William and Mary in Virginia. And my concentration was in higher education, and I had a cognate in business administration.
You're overqualified, to be a bookseller.
Oh, I know. Well, I didn't become a bookseller yet.
Okay,
I still have another career to go through before I
keep
came.
Going.
So when I left the Army and I took off my uniform, both those degrees served me well. I applied for and was accepted, selected, I guess, actually, to be the director of the Marine Corps Research Center in Quantico. Now, that sounds like a think tank, but it isn't. Rather, the research center was both an organization and a location that supported the research of others. It maintained research collections, and it provided access to the research that other people conducted. And we had 3 components. The first was the library of the Marine Corps. And give you an idea of the size, it was about 100,000 volumes, and it was a specialized library, as you'd expect. We concentrated on military history, specifically the Marine Corps, military arts and sciences, military technology, and military aspects of international studies, international relations, government, political science, and the federal programming, planning, budgeting, management system. And the second component of the research center was the U.S. Marine Corps Archives and Special Collections. And it's just what it sounds like. On the archive side of the house, we maintained the important official documents of the Marine Corps, whether they were orders or directives or plans or regulations, what have you, correspondence. And on the special collection side, we had a tremendous number of personal papers collections, diaries, manuscripts, journals, working notes, all related to the Marine Corps and Marines, everything from privates all the way up to general officers, including all the commandants, most of the commandants. The other thing that the archives maintained was, and made available, were the research products that were coming out of the Marine Corps Combat Development Command and the faculty and staff and researchers assigned to the Marine Corps University. And when I mention Marine Corps University, a lot of times people, kind of say, what is that? What an oxymoron.
Yeah.
But in truth, all of the uniformed services have very, very comprehensive and very robust continuing education programs and professional development programs, and the Marine Corps was no different. And in fact, the research center was located on the Marine Corps University campus, and I had an additional duty. I was also the vice president for research and instructional support at the Marine Corps University. And we had 7 subordinate colleges, schools, and academies, 3 of which were degree-granting institutions. We had accredited degrees, master's degrees in military science, operational planning, and strategic studies. So anyway, back to the research center. The third part of the research center was the main Marine Corps conference facility. We had a big, large auditorium, big, configurable conference rooms, and about 24 smaller breakout rooms, workrooms. And all this was co-located with the library and the archives. And we hosted maybe 500 events a year there.
Wow.
We didn't provide the content. It was just like the people who host, these conference centers. We provided all the support. And I did that until I retired for a second time in 2012, and that's when I finally was able to devote a lot of time to book selling, which I really wanted to do for quite some time.
So is this your first book fair?
No, I've been doing book fairs since probably the late 90s. This is the second ABAA fair.
What was the first?
Here. I don't, even though I'm from the East Coast, I do the shadow shows
okay.
in New York and in Boston. I've done those for a number of years. But I did the show in Oakland last year, and I'm doing this show, obviously.
So you're happy?
Oh, yeah. It's been a good show.
Let me ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Other than that. Do you maintain an internet presence?
Yes.
Do you have a homepage?
Yes.
And what percentage of your inventory is online?
Probably, I try to make it 100%. I don't have a large
What
inventory.
is the size of your inventory?
Probably about 700 books. Well, it's not really books. Now I deal mostly in ephemera, paper, and personal narratives.
Personal narratives.
A lot of personal narratives.
From what era? What era?
All eras. And it's all American narratives, American stories.
And so that's your specialty, essentially?
Yeah, I guess so. I used to always say I never really had a specialty, that I just bought and sold things I liked. But over the years, it's become more and more personal stories. And part of that came, when I first started out, I sold mostly children's books. And that's actually how the name came to be. Read them again, read your kids' books again. Yeah. But over time, and watching dealers around me when I'd set up at fairs and shows and seeing what they were selling and learning from that, I'd incorporate what I saw there that I liked into my business model. And I started switching to more nonfiction and more ephemera. And then, talking, and when I do the shows, the guys who were higher up in the food chain, I'd watch what they were buying from me. I sold a lot of stuff to Joanne Reisler and Maggie Page and the Bowmans and Tom Congleton and sometimes Bill Reese. And that made an impression on me, what they were buying, because I knew they had to be selling it, and they were selling it for a lot more than I was.
Well, yeah.
And so I started thinking, maybe this is the kind of stuff I ought to collect. And then the other thing was just talking to my customers. And I'm not sure if it's because the way I started doing mostly collectible shows and antique shows, or whether it's because the type of stuff I stocked from the beginning, but what I found was that most of the people who were buying books from me weren't book collectors. They didn't define themselves as book collectors. They were collectors and they bought collectible books, but they were thematic collectors. They collected stuff that was personal, interesting for some reason to them, whether it was about their occupation or about the military or about their region. And books were only one facet of what they were buying. They were buying artifacts, they were buying photographs, they were buying, scrapbooks, advertising, ephemera. And so I started adding that to my inventory. And what I found was, for me, it was easier to sell that kind of material than it was to sell books. I mean, books had become common. You could get them anywhere. But the ephemera was unusual, and the personal narratives were unique. So I found that sold much faster and much more easily than the other stuff. So that's, from very early on, that's kind of where I gravitated, and that's what I do now.
Who were some of the people who influenced you or who may have mentored you?
Sure, mostly I was School of Hard Knocks, to be honest. However, when I first started doing shows, I found I was setting up at shows, whether they were antique shows or some of the early book fairs, with people like Rob and Julia Jordan and Lauren Baer, Nick Cook, Jim Pressgraves, the people in the Virginia area.
Yeah.
And when I do the Baltimore Antique Fair and book fair and antique show there, Lynn and Tucker Respis often were next to me, and on the other side I frequently had Wilfred and Susan DeFreitas from Canada. And so while I can't say they were mentors, I used to pay attention to how they did business and the way they worked with customers and the way they set up and what they sold and bought. And I incorporated that. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I paid attention to what the big dealers were buying from me, and that had paid off over time.
Well, it's always good to know what you're selling,
right,
to who, and then seeing what they get for it.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Because they're going to make a profit.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that I've always liked to do research. So when I do the personal narratives, and whether they're photo narratives, scrapbooks, or journals or whatever, I like to research the people, and I like to research that. And I try to use that information when I write the descriptions so that the customers understand why what I've got is important and why they might want to think it should be part of their collection.
So there really isn't any one person that you could point to and say,
No.
this person really made an influence.
No. The guy who I probably did the most shows with and who used to voice his opinion most often, a crusty old Baltimore police sergeant, a retired police sergeant. Antique. I think he'd been selling antiques and books since I was probably in the 4th or 5th grade.
Right.
His name's Ed Matson.
Yeah.
He's kind of a cantankerous guy at times.
Yeah.
And he's
Curmudgeonly.
Yeah, curmudgeonly, yeah. And he used to always, he was very free with his advice to me when we'd set up together. And like everybody else, the parts that made sense to me I took, and the parts that didn't, I just kind of let slide.
Well, so let's get that mentoring issue is out of the way. Now let me ask you another question.
Sure.
What do you see as the future of our trade in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you see as the most challenging things we're going to have to do?
It's an interesting question, and I've thought about that, but I haven't really been a pure bookseller for a long time. I made a transition to paper, and ephemera, and unique items some years ago. And I can honestly say I don't see any either uptick in my business or any downturn in my business over the last 4 or 5 years, you know, in terms of sales and business. So for me personally, I think I'm positioned where I want to be, and I think the kind of stuff I sell is going to keep being, you know, popular over the next few years. My sales are pretty well evenly divided between online sales, book fairs, and catalogs and direct quotes. You know, and again, remember, I started in the late 90s, and that's when the internet had already, you know, pretty much taken root. You know, when I first started selling, there was no World Wide Web. It was all, you know, all text and pictures, but I've been selling online since the beginning, so I can't say that it either hurt me or helped me. So you know, I don't have the foundation, I guess, the historical foundation to really judge that. But for what I'm selling, I think I'm planning on just kind of continuing in the march. And
Where is your location?
we live on the East Coast. We live in Montclair, Virginia.
Montclair, Virginia.
Virginia, not New Jersey.
Where is that in relation to Richmond?
It's between Richmond and Washington, D.C. It's about 45 miles south of D.C., 45 minutes on an exceptional day. And
How long have you lived there?
we've lived there since 1997. We've
1997.
lived in Virginia. Before that, we lived in Virginia Beach for 11 years. So we've become transplanted Virginians.
Well, the weather down there is iffy.
It's pretty nasty right now.
Oh, is it nasty
I
now?
guess, yeah, it's supposed to have some Arctic blasts coming through and snow. And we're hoping to be able to fly out on Monday.
Well, you should be able to fly. You're not going to have a problem.
I don't know. They're still talking about maybe the airport having problems on Monday.
Also, they'll land you at
hopefully
a
not.
different airport.
Yeah, that's just what I need.
And then bus you somewhere. You know how that works.
Right.
Okay, before I let you go, I got a couple of more questions for my question list. Okay, when you first started using computers, did you find the transition difficult or easy?
It was easy for me because that's how I started.
Okay.
You know, and I'd worked with computers for a long time, and you know, I was already online, you know, in the old Usenet days, you know, and I started listing stuff there just with text and CompuServe and the early days of AOL. And so it was kind of just a natural transition, you know, for me from the text-based stuff to the, you know, today with the World Wide Web and pictures.
Yeah, I mean, it's. Would you consider yourself a mail order business or an internet business?
Like I said, it's about, it really is both in terms of the numbers of things I sell and the dollar value. It's pretty much evenly divided between what I sell at fairs and shows, what I sell online, and what I sell by catalogs.
How many catalogs do you issue a year?
Always at least one, sometimes as many as 3, frequently 2, I think.
And are they on specific subjects or are they
No,
general?
everything, general. But again, they focus on personal narratives, photograph out, scrapbooks, things like that, and ephemera.
Sounds pretty cool. You said did you have a son and a daughter?
Yes.
Are either one of them have any interest whatsoever in carrying on?
No, not at all.
Not they could care less.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So it's just me and my wife.
Well, that's got to